Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Yes, we heard you, Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, today we will go in domain 2, task 1. I think that domain 1 was interesting, but domain 2 for me is the most interesting domain of the PSP certification. It's really going into the design of the system. It start to talk about light, about the video surveillance, physical security in general. And today we will change a little bit the way that we have been working. I try to streamline the process. Usually we provide a question and give some time to answer the question. Today we will do the same, but in a different way. We will not have the quiz online. We will have the question in the PowerPoint presentation, and I will provide the quiz online after the fact on Monday. You will have the quiz and the key answer. If you want to take the quiz by yourself, it will be good. If we don't have time today for extend to take the quiz or to go in all of the questions, you will have the question at the end of the section or on the weekend. Also, maybe because this is a long task, domain 1 task, domain 2 task 1, maybe we need to extend the time to sit from 5:30 to maybe to 7, 90 minutes. You are more welcome to stay or to leave the meeting till you have any other thing to do. And say that, I will welcome Alan that will handle the presentation. And also I want to say thank you to Alan because yes, I have been preparing all this material, but Alan has been taking the time to double check the material, review everything, and for me it's so important that other people can take a look on the thing that I'm doing. Alan, it's all yours. You can show your screen and go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Nelson. I appreciate that. Yeah, your material is very well done. So I only have to have a look at a couple things, and everything else is perfect. So no problem there at all. Okay, so let's start with, and I agree with Nelson. This is my favorite domain as well, because it does get into something that I'm more familiar with, which is physical security and the byproducts that are in that little group and everything else that fits into it. So it's a very interesting domain and task. So this section, domain 2, task 1, the title of this is Establish Security Program Performance Requirements. That is very important because you're looking at products that have to show what they can do before installation, during, and after installation too. So it's very important to have these performance criteria all set up. So we're going to be looking at designing, specifying, and measuring security systems, measuring their performance. And the art of writing clear and actionable security requirements from concept to performance verification. We'll be looking a little bit at some of the standards: NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA 730, 731, which we'll talk about, and ISO 31000, and the ASIS PAP, or PAP for short. That is Physical Asset Protection Standard. That's a standard from ASIS. And I was just looking today, you can actually download that document for free, the ebook version at least, if you're an ASIS member. So check that out, please. So let's get started. We're going to look first at some design constraints. So what we're talking about here is basically when you're looking at writing an RFP or selecting technologies for a project, these are the things that contain you. There are kind of almost not quite roadblocks, but they are what the word constraints is very, very fitting for these descriptions coming up. So let's start a little bit with where we are here with regulatory requirements. Okay, so regulatory requirements. So these are mandatory rules and laws imposed by authorities. So we're talking about local building codes, ADA compliance, NFPA again, IBC, and privacy laws. Not a lot of privacy laws in the US regarding video surveillance. Audio, yes. But in Europe especially, there are certain constraints about data sharing and video feeds. So you got to be careful. Budget constraints, that's a little more obvious. That is basically, you're constrained by how much money the user or the customer has to put into the budget for his security systems. And when you're looking at budgets, it's very important to consider life cycle costs, not just the cost of 100 cameras and the video management system and the wiring, but also the life cycle costs. What about upgrading in the future? What about maintenance? Any maintenance to that devices you're installing? That also should be considered into the budget constraint. That's called life cycle costs, and we'll be talking about that later. Material and construction constraints. So these would be things like historic buildings, perhaps. There can be limitations on what you can do inside and outside that building. Inside, of course, if it's an older building from the 1900s or 1800s, I should say, perhaps it's very difficult to add in low voltage cabling or whatever to the inside without causing some damage. So you've got to be very careful about those constraints from the material and construction side. System compatibility. This is very important also. So any new system that you're specifying or writing an RFP for, it needs to integrate with whatever the customer already has and with his existing infrastructure. So if the customer would really like 112 megapixel cameras, you got to make sure that his infrastructure can handle that, his network can handle that load, that capacity, that bandwidth. So it's important to think about system compatibility and integration also with what they already have, including access control, any video systems, or anything else they may have. Okay, so next up, we're going to look at risk analysis results in design. So risk analysis is really the foundational element that what we're talking about here. It should inform, it should be the design decision for your physical security system. So to have a little bit of a look at risk analysis, let's go down the list. So the first one, we were talking a lot about assets. And of course, the asset identification is probably one of the most critical of a risk analysis. You're determining what assets you have and what needs to be protected. What is your asset? For threat assessment, who or what poses a danger? And that is under the identifying category. Vulnerability evaluation, that's pinpointing where are the weaknesses. And impact assessment, we were talking a little bit about that last week too. Assessing the impact and what are the consequences of a security breach. How would it affect your business sustainability going forward? So you must address credible threats, mitigate the most critical vulnerabilities, protect the highest value assets, and achieve response times within the delay margin. Here are some relevant security terminologies. Very important to know these and what they mean. You've probably heard of a punch list. That is typical of what just before final project approval, there's always a punch list, things that have to be addressed, items that have to be addressed, little things here and there that don't work, things that aren't working as planned. That punch list will tell you what needs to be fixed before final project approval. A field test. We're going to talk a lot about field testing and acceptance testing, but a field test is basically just doing a proof of concept or just a demo, basically, of the product that the customer wants to use and what perhaps has been recommended. So the field test would take that product, put it in the exact environment that you would be working in, including nighttime, daytime, if it's a camera, and looking at what it can do and how well it fits in with the initial plan. That was always my favorite part of any project when I was working in the security field before I retired. It was getting the product, setting it up on a tripod, it was a camera in that case, and just making sure that everything looks good and it can do exactly what we think it should do. Acceptance testing, however, is the formal verification process that confirms all of these installed products meet the design and performance criteria. So typically you can look at it, this is before the project installation, field test. Acceptance testing is when the project is done, basically. When everything's in, you just want to confirm that it meets the performance criteria. Schematic design. So these are typically early phase concept drawings and layouts. It might be done, it's not so much done on paper anymore, although some old schoolers still prefer paper, but it's normally all in CAD these days and shareable by PDFs or other means, so you can see what's going on, what the schematic design would be. Integration, ensuring all subsystems work together as a cohesive unit. So we'll talk more about this, but everything that you're putting in that's an addition or new has to integrate well together and not cause any conflicts with one another. And of course, design basis. So design basis is basically the rationale of the system design. It's kind of a detailed account of why and how the project and its design will meet the expectations and needs of the owner and the users and the people using the system. So it's the why and how that you're selecting the product for the design itself. Okay, now this is a good part. I like this because it's good to talk about these various security design concepts. We're going to look at the 4Ds, defense in depth, CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. We spoke about this a little bit previously. Today we're going to delve in a little deeper into it. So let's start with the 4Ds. The 4Ds are deter, detect, delay, and deny. And this is basically a framework. And this is kind of the foundation for physical protection systems. So if you can think of layers in this case, and we'll have a diagram come up that might explain this a little better, but think of this as security layers. Deter, that is to discourage an adversary from attempting intrusion. So that can mean having a real strong fence with barbed wire or razor wire on top, with working security cameras that don't look like they're broken or hanging off the mount. Windows that look open, like closed and secure. That is to deter. So only the guys who are really, really serious about getting into your facility are going to try. So it's kind of like a filter. Detect. Discover unauthorized activity. So if they do get past your first layer, you need to be able to detect them. You perhaps using sensors or surveillance cameras. Delay. Slow the adversary long enough for a response from your security team. So basically, there'll be things like locks, access control, strong gates, strong fences in an inner layer that would delay someone who's trying to get through. Of course, once they've been detected, the delay should follow, obviously, right? Because they are detected, and then you delay them so you get a chance to actually see what they're doing and confront them. And of course, deny, prevent access to the target altogether. So these are applied probably at your asset area, your internal area. So you would have really strong vaults, locks, access control, and probably more surveillance and sensors. They would fit in any of these layers. So that's the 4Ds. That's the basics of the 4Ds. So as a summary table, deter, discourage attempts. So that would be an example of your deterrent would be lighting. Lighting is an excellent deterrent because no one wants to try and, no adversary wants to try and get into a building that's well lit. Signage, private property, no entry, cameras in use, that sort of thing. Visible patrols, very good deterrent if you have visible security patrols. And anti-climb angles on the top of the fencing too, of course. Detect, identify intrusions early. That would be an example of that technology might be alarms, sensors, surveillance cameras, radar sensors, LiDAR, that sort of thing, anything that would detect someone moving in that area, that secure area that you've set. Delay, of course, is to slow down access. That would include locks, barriers, reinforced doors, anything that slows them down. And deny. The goal is to prevent access completely, and that would be access control, secure vaults, man traps. A man trap, you may already know this, but just in case someone's not sure, it's a portal where it's also called a sally port sometimes. So it's like a security access control vestibule where you have a door that you enter that then gets you into an area where the second door in that vestibule will not open until you close the first door. So the two sets of interlocking doors. So the first set of doors must close before the second set opens. So those sort of things are denial. So any questions so far on what we're talking about? If not, I'll continue. So the next design concept is defense in depth, and it also uses a layered approach. So defense in depth, it's basically uses multiple overlapping layers of protection. And this safeguards, of course, people, property, information, and operations. And the layers can be physical barriers, electronic systems, even policies and procedures, and human intervention. So these are very fluid as well. I mean, don't think of this as a hard, fast line when you're looking at here. These could be fluid lines. They could be changing. They could be going to various kind of other purposes. So let's look at the purposes that we have here. Redundancy. There should be no single point of failure. So if one system breaks in the exterior perimeter layer, something in this layer should catch up with it or support that layer in terms of the failure. It should be no single point of failure in a defense in depth concept. There's a delay, almost like the 4Ds. That slows adversaries exactly the same as the 4D concept, and that allows detection and a response. One other aspect is flexibility. So this should be able to adapt to various threat types. It could be external intruders, insider threats, anything. Defense in depth is a good solution for any of these types of threats. And risk reduction. Again, even if one control is defeated, others continue to function. So the key layers of defense in this defense in depth model, physical controls. That includes fences, walls, locked doors, turnstiles, bollards, gates, blast resistant barriers, that sort of thing. Technical controls would be, of course, surveillance, television, CCTV, access control, intrusion detection, analytics, sensors, PIR, LiDAR, radar, thermal, that sort of thing. Anything in that environment would be called a technical control. There's also administrative controls. That would be security policies and procedures. Those are very important and are part of a defense in depth plan. That would also include background checks for visitors, vendors, employees, and access approvals. Security officers and personnel, reception staff, and internal threat awareness. and trained responders. And of course, part of all that is regular drills and communication on the plan, on the policies and procedures. So again, looking down here, we'll just go through this quickly. On the outer layer, on the perimeter layer, you would think of lighting, fencing, bollards, gates, walls, intrusion detection. On the yellow layer, this inner layer, if you want to call it that, that is where you would do your policies and procedures. It would be visitors, mailroom controls, access controls, delivery procedures. If there's a loading dock, that has to be secured and still allow the driver to unload his gear, and password controls. Your core assets, of course, are in the middle of all this, and that would include your reception areas, any walls, doors, windows, access controls, the IT data room, and even firewalls in your data room and your server room, emergency systems, and video surveillance intrusion detection. So that is defense in depth, and we'll talk about this some more. So we
have a question on the chat,
yes.
Alan.
Oh, good. Yes, I'm sorry. I can't see the chat window, so please go ahead.
Do we need to know the specific parameter, like how high a fence is, of what walls do doors require? You don't need to know the specific parameter because every project will be different, at least for the test. But keep in mind that it's a lot of information that you should know, or at least have reference. You should have document reference in order to go to those documents and review the document and say, okay, based on this particular project, I need a fence of this type, okay? We go in the domain 2 on the next class. We will have more information about fence, walls, and those kind of perimeter protection. But you don't need to know the detail, like the lights. We have a bunch of different type of lights that you don't need to have that, in my opinion. You don't need to have all that information in your mind. You need to know that those type of lights exist. And when you have a project, you go to your documentation, you go to your POA book and review the POA book and say, okay, I need this for this. But for the test, I don't believe that you need those specific detail.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Nelson. So defense in depth. Once again, you have your outer perimeter that we saw previously, and that would include fences, lighting, surveillance to deter and detect the intruder. The intermediate layer, and you see, you notice this is not all physical hardware too. It's policies and procedures and password management, that sort of thing. Intermediate layer would be access control gate. As far as valid credentials, of course, that would be the intermediate layer. Interior zones would be turnstiles and man traps, slow progress, video analytics, flag suspicious behavior. And the final barrier will be perhaps biometric authentication, fingerprint, retina scan, whatever, and to protect your secure vault where your asset is located. So the idea being for response here is security personnel are alerted at the first layer and intercept at the third layer. So let's have a look now at some benefits of defense in depth. So redundancy. Explanation of redundancy is, of course, backup protection in case of failure. One system can back up another. You may have a camera that fails, maybe another camera is covering that angle, or a sensor can take over from that. Time delay for response. This, of course, buys critical seconds or minutes for intervention. The benefit of increased adversary burden. It really does filter out the people who really, really want to get into your facility, and those who just can't be bothered. It's too much of a risk for them. So resources and skills are required to breach all layers. Risk mitigation, the benefit is it supports regulatory compliance and risk-based design. And of course, scalability. It allows modular security expansion or upgrades. So as you think in terms of a modular approach to this, you can add more product or more technology to expand your plan. Okay, the next approach we're going to look at is something we've spoken about quite a bit. It's CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And there's a whole study on this. There's a separate kind of silo of CPTED in terms of presentation material you can look at, presentations you can go to at the GSX shows and various other shows. So CPTED by itself is a standalone kind of art, if you want. So the idea of CPTED, it's a multidisciplinary approach, and it focuses on designing the physical environment to reduce opportunities for crime. So the core principles there are natural surveillance. What that means is maximize visibility using lighting and layout and clear sight lines. Clear sight lines are very, very important for human intervention, for guards to see what's happening and make it very difficult for an adversary to cross a piece of land if he's so visible. Also for cameras. Cameras don't like to work, and obviously when they're hidden, you can't see anything. And sensors, any kind of line sensor like PIR or anything else, it doesn't work well when there's trees or other obstructions in the way. So clear layout and line of sight is very important for natural surveillance. Territorial reinforcement. So you use design elements here to show ownership and control. So that would be fencing signage, signage on your fencing. Access control, not quite the same as physical access control where you swipe cards or put your fingerprint on. What they're talking about here is limit and define access routes and define entries and barriers. So maybe that would also include having an employee parking area and a guest parking area. That keeps everything nicely separated so it makes it easier to survey that kind of landscape. And maintenance, nothing to do with product maintenance, but CPTED encourages you to have a well-kept facility. The grass is cut down, everything is in good repair, the fences are in good repair, the windows aren't broken, and a well-kept facility discourages criminal behavior. That is a known fact. So those are the core principles of CPTED.
Yeah, that is. I don't know if you know, Alan, you can mention the Windows broken theory. Is basic. Mhm.
You go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the was a theory that put in New York by a mayor. I don't recall his name, but it's very famous. And the idea is that you park a car or you have a house that have a windows broken, and you don't take care of that. You don't do them good maintenance. You will have more like that. You will have more people that with broken windows. You will have more break-in. But if you keep everything clean and well maintained, you will have a better neighborhood. It's the same in security. It's the same in your house. If you maintain everything well, you will have a better living. That is the theory about the broken windows.
Yes. Yes. Thanks, Nelson. That's an interesting point. Definitely. So we'll be talking about CPTED some more in Domain 2, but that's the basics of CPTED. You'll hear a lot about that. Like I said, it's a standalone discipline almost. It was originally, if I remember, Nelson, it was Oscar Newman who wrote the book Defensible Space way back when, and that is the basis for crime prevention through environmental design.
Yeah, and in the test, keep in mind that it's sure that you will have some question or few questions about um, crime prevention through environmental design. And at this moment, if my memory doesn't fail, really, we start with one phase that was the CPT. After that, they talk about CPT second generation, and at this moment, we are talking about CPT third generation.
Hmm. Right. There were some problems with concepts of generation one, especially with in urban neighborhoods, that they found it was probably not a good fit for some neighborhoods. And I think I haven't read much about the third generation, but I do know they're on the third generation of septet. Okay, so another concept. Let's look at another concept. Let's talk about point versus area security. So these are two approaches, or two foundational approaches in physical security. So point security, it focuses protection on individual high value assets, like a data center, a vault, or an executive suite, for instance. And there is an assumption that the rest of the facility may not be fully controlled. So it relies heavily on protecting a specific location using reinforced doors, cameras, biometric access, just for that one single point, that one specific target. So area security, by contrast, treats a larger space, like an entire facility or a campus, as the protected space. So this typically funnels all access through a single control port or checkpoint. So think of a military base or an embassy or a border crossing, something like that. So that's what you're thinking, point versus area security. So the focus of point security is specific targets or assets. For area security, it's a broad perimeter or facility-wide zones. The perimeter control in point security is typically loosely controlled, but tightly controlled in area security. An example of point security would be securing a server room. That's your asset you're trying to protect. Area security would be securing an entire corporate campus. And security layering as a feature. So point security, of course, is fewer layers. It's got localized protection, and area security has multiple layers across zone. And it could use the 4Ds or depth security, or it could use a combination of both. Next up, let's look at some conflict avoidance in security design. So conflict arises when two design elements, let's think access control and emergency egress, are implemented without considering their interaction. So as an example, a locked door might provide security, but it might also violate fire codes or create an evacuation hazard. And also security turnstiles can obstruct daily operations. If they're placed without understanding the traffic flow, they can actually slow everything down and cause a horrendous backlog. So to avoid these kinds of issues, these conflicts, the security designer must balance competing needs. Electronic and structural measures should enhance, not duplicate each other. So electronic access control cameras versus structural measures such as obstructions, bollards, walls. They should enhance each other, not duplicate each other's roles. Access versus security control. Avoid overly restrictive designs that hinder operations. And that leads us to safety versus security. Life safety codes, OSHA and whatever else, and ADA, and emergency egress must not be compromised. And user experience versus protection. So seamless integration reduces resistance and circumvention. If something is hard to do, they'll probably find a way to get around it. If it's an emergency exit or if it's a turnstile, if it's hard to get through, they're probably going to find a way around it. And the key principle of all this is that security must operate without compromising safety. And that also includes operations or user experience. User experience being what your average employee will go through in a day to get past the security or through the security. It shouldn't be a headache for them. Okay, next up, we have a very important part. We're going to discuss the differences between various requirements, operational, functional. Let's start with operational requirements. So operational requirements, that describes how the system will be used and maintained on a day-to-day basis. That must reflect the actual organizational workflows and staffing levels. Examples are, who monitors the system and when? Is it going to be shift work for the monitoring people? Are they going to be in a separate control room with a shift basis, or are they just going to get up and leave when they have to leave and not have anyone replace them if they go for a bathroom break or for lunch or whatever? How are alarms escalated and responded to? Very important. There should be an escalation path for alarms. What are the visitor access protocols? Do they have a card that times out for the day? Will they get access to a restroom and a cafeteria maybe while they're in the building for an event or a presentation or something? Is the guard force integrated with the system? So examples would be mobile patrol apps, etc. And how are procedures documented and reviewed? So very important, a good statement down here. Poorly documented operational requirements result in system misuse or underperformance. Think of this as the user manual for your operation and for the system. So that's operational. Next up, we have functional requirements. So functional requirements they specify what the system must do. So think features, functions, and interoperability. So we described operational requirement. That's basically how the system will be used and maintained. This is what the system must do. Functional is what the system must do. So this is how this defines what the system must do. So access control. These are some functions that the access control has been defined as must being able to do. It must authenticate the badge, PIN, or biometric credential. It must log events and generate audit trails. And it must operate offline during network failures. Very important because everything these days, technology-wise, in the security and the physical security market is on a network. Cameras, sensors, everything is connected to a network. So it's really important that everything still maintains functionality when the network goes offline. It's got to be locally be able to handle everything. Surveillance, continuous and motion-based recording, that should be a functional requirement. And that's more important these days. Currently, there are some very good smart codecs out there. And a codec is what encodes the video of a surveillance camera onto a network. And they're very, very efficient these days. So realistically, you can continually record and have it store on your storage system for quite long periods of time. But it's important to maintain motion-based because that gives you your event where something moved or your analytic was triggered or whatever happened. But you can do both side by side, continuous and motion-based. Continuous being important because if your event-based recording misses something, it should be capable of live. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I will say that nowadays you can, in the system, nowadays you can set up a different stream of video. In some of one stream could be continuous, maybe 1 frame per second, and the second stream of the same camera could be based on motion. If you have an activity, you can increase the quantity of frame per second in order to have more details on that video.
Yep, and that's very important to be able to do that, simply because you don't want to miss. If your analytic doesn't quite get it, or your motion-based system, which does happen, then you still have backup on your continuous stream. And integration also, the surveillance system should integrate with analytics for clients. So many good cameras these days have analytics built in that are quite good. They're very competitive with what used to be on a server. So loitering, for instance, is a very useful analytic. You can set it, say, if someone is in a place that he's not supposed to be there for 10, 15, 30 seconds, 1 minute, it will alert you based on that loitering. Line crossing also for directional control. If you don't want anyone passing a certain direction, or a car, a vehicle, you can set up a line crossing analytic to capture that and to give you that as an event in your recording. Integration and redundancy, of course. So you're going to be able to link with any HR functions, fire alarms, and ID systems. Support various protocols and APIs, ONVIF, OSDP, SIA, DCO9. ONVIF, I was around when ONVIF first started. I think it was Sony, AXIS, Panasonic, and maybe Pelco at the time, were a commission who came up with ONVIF. It stands for Open Network Video Interface Forum. And the idea was to make video compatible across the board. No matter what manufacturer you were, your basic functions of the camera will be able to record on any video management system. OSDP, if you're into access control, that is Open Supervised Device Protocol. That is basically, it improves interoperability between access control and other security products. And SIA, Security Industry Association. If you're not a member, it's actually good to join the SIA as well. They have a website, I think it's sia.org, if you want to join the SIA. But their DCO9 protocol, it's basically for, what do you call it? Central monitoring. So it's a protocol that if you're reporting to a central station for monitoring and for events, this protocol is what they use to carry the event content. And your integration and redundancy should also include failover servers. If something goes wrong, that's an automatic switchover, and backup power. Okay, as you can see, this is quite a detailed presentation. It's there's a lot in here, but hopefully we'll get through this and it will stick in your head. So the third requirement, we have operational, we had functional, and now we have performance. So performance requirements, that would be an example. This defines how well the system must perform, especially under load or stress. So the metrics we use would be, perhaps, here's some examples. For video, you would record at 1080p resolution, 30 frames per second for 90 days. The system must be able to do that. Access control, an example being it must handle 10,000 plus badge holders with 1 second read time. Turnstiles process 500 plus people per hour, and alarm response alert shown in 3 seconds maximum. So that basically is an important part of this of the requirement, the requirements that we have. So all of this will be defined in design-based documentation, cut sheets and manufacturer specifications, and performance verification plans. So that is performance requirements. Any questions on this?
We don't, let me see, we have no question. Basically,
Okay.
we have 2 comments in the chat. People can read, but it's important to remember that surveillance does not cover everything. Coverage need versus cost versus privacy. That's right. Also, AL say that. Uh, so here the thing, your day-to-day operation runs smoothly with post-order right. But where things get tricky is when you need to pull in your SOP, AOP, or COP, especially during catastrophic event. Basically, the thing that he is telling us is that, yes, we can have a system should be work when we need the system. Um, I always say that for me, for example, the best video surveillance system will be a black screen. A black screen that I can get a notification when something happened. At this moment, we have a lot of analytic, a lot of AI that we can use. We are not in that level of system that we can trust in only in the system. But it will be for me the best system. Really use a system when we need it, and the system is a support for the people. It's not the people, the support for the system.
Yes, exactly right. And I think analytics have really come around because all the studies they did on people just watching screens. There's a time limit how much information and how much ability a person has to be alert in front of a bank of monitors. It's not very long. And a lot of analytics became around because of that, which instead of looking at the screen, you're looking for alerts. Okay, let's have a look at some good design practices in physical security. The first one is needs-based design. So that is basically solutions should be tailored to your risk assessment and specific threats. Team-based decision-making, also very important. That should involve security, operations, IT, and HR, of course. And that is very important to have a team-based decision-making. Because like I said before, if the IT guy isn't involved when you're putting 100 12 megapixel cameras on his network, he may not be too happy. Of course, you should really have a separate network maybe, but he should still be involved. Informed and critical thinking. Decisions should be based on data, not fear, and certainly not sales pressure. Phased implementation. That's a good way to create a system, do it in phases, and have a timeline for each phase. That allows evaluation, adjustment, and scalability. And balanced integration. Again, we're talking about aligning with life safety, business continuity, and daily operations. And critical thinking is vital. We'll see in the next slide what I mean by that. So the next slide is poor design practices to avoid. Panic buying, reactive spending after incidents. It's understandable, but it's often unnecessary or excessive and expensive. So reactive, something happens and you immediately go out, you get a sales rep in from a company, and you end up buying stuff that may not be necessary and also expensive. Do not let the vendor dictate or drive your system design. You're in control, you're the person. The vendor-driven solution is never usually a good idea. They typically don't understand what you're trying to do in terms of your plan. Avoid over-engineering, like adding multiple badge scans to get through an area. Badge scans, facial recognition, and locked vestibules to enter a low-risk office. That's kind of over-engineering and unnecessary and adds another point of failure in many cases and can lead to frustrated employees too. Redundancy without purpose. Yeah, that's typical of having multiple access control readers in an area where you only should have one, and you can do other things with the doors. And security versus safety conflicts. We've already spoken about this. It could be a blocked emergency exit, creating an ADA violation, or it could be a blocked egress door of some kind that makes life very difficult for people trying to get out of the building. And just remember, because it's more complex doesn't mean it's more secure. Security metrics, measuring what matters. So metrics is where we measure, obviously, what we're doing. We have numbers, we have quantitative data to help us with our plan. So all of the operational, functional, and performance requirements, this is where the metrics help us. They will help us identify underperformance and justify budgets and align security posture with organizational objectives. So SMART metrics framework. This is one of these acronyms that helps you remember SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, repeatable, and time bound. I think it was also used in our performance reviews when I worked. So SMART, it's used in a lot of other crossover areas. So specific, it should be focused on a clear outcome. Is the metric clearly defined? Measurable, can it be quantified in percentage, time, or frequency? Is it realistically achievable? Is it feasible? Repeatable, can it be constantly replicated? And time bound. What that means is it's measured and data is collected on set intervals, either monthly, daily, weekly, hourly, whatever. So that is the SMART metric. Next up, we'll look at common KPIs, key performance indicators. Something you might see, or you may be already familiar with, MTBF, mean time between failures. Typically, this is a number that is presented by the manufacturer of the product you're using. He usually has this on his data sheet or in the A&E documentation. But just remember, if a product says its MTBF is 100,000 hours, that doesn't mean that it's going to be 100,000 hours between failures. It means that in the factory, they've tested each individual component and the calculated amount is 100,000 hours. So it's a number that is used, it's a metric that is used, but just be careful, it doesn't mean that the product will last 100,000 hours. False alarm rate, nuisance versus legitimate. So typically you could get a percentage on that by taking the number of false alarms, divide it by the total number of alarms and multiply 100, and you get a percentage of false alarms. If your false alarm rate is very high, then you get people tuning out from hearing the alarm. It happens all the time. Alarm response time, it should be something that you agree on. It could be minutes, it could be seconds, but you got to have an alarm response time. Training completion rates, how many people have completed training? It could be the security personnel, it could be the operators, it could be the security manager himself. And security post compliance scores. So all of these are common key performance indicators. Sorry. Okay, there is a tool the ASIS has called the MET. It stands for Metrics Evaluation Tool. So it's the ASIS Security Metrics Evaluation Tool. Go to the ASIS website, asisonline.org, and type in Security Met Tool. You'll find a whole bunch of information on this. But basically, it was designed to help a user identify a metric's strengths and weaknesses so the weaknesses can be corrected. So the framework that the MET tool provides is technical. It can give you an idea on reliability, validity. I'm having a hard time speaking tonight, and generalizability. So, so how well something works in various places or situations is generalizability. Operational criteria, cost, timeliness, and manipulation, and strategic. Return on investment, organizational relevance, and communication. So That is the ASIS Security MET tool, or metrics evaluation tool. So let's have a look now at Enterprise Performance Framework. This is another framework based on 3 ideas: effectiveness, efficiency, and strategic initiatives. So it starts with the overall idea being sustained quality performance, and then branching off into operational performance and strategic performance. So for effectiveness, what they're saying is, how well are the security systems and programs operating? For example, in detecting, delaying, or enunciating. Efficiency, how quickly are the organization's programs responding to security alarms? And strategic initiatives, how well are the objectives of the security program aligned with the overall objectives of the organization? So that is the Enterprise Performance Framework. And finally, in this slide, this has been a long one, life cycle and implementation considerations. We mentioned this previously, but a critical aspect is the need to consider life cycle costs rather than focusing solely on product cost and initial installation cost. So design documentation. The basis of design justifies system intent and requirements. The schematic design would include early concepts, drawings, PDFs done on CAD or whatever. System specifications, that would be from the manufacturers. And the punch list, which he spoke about, final issues before project closeout. And ongoing operations, the preventative maintenance cost, firmware updates, software updates, change management. So if something needs to be modified in the system, that needs to be documented. User training, of course, role-specific modules for guards, operators, admin people, that should all be there too. Operational costs and upgrade costs. And these metrics apply all stages from design through maintenance to ensure long-term value. Well, that took about an hour. So that is the final slide in domain 2, task 1. So Nelson, you want to go ahead with the quiz? Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, let's go with the question. And as I say at the beginning, in this section, we will change a little bit the way that we handle the question. It's not quiz. If you want, you can answer the question on the chat. We will provide few minutes, few seconds to read the question and try to figure it out what is the right answer. And don't worry if the answer is at this moment is the right answer. I know that the questions are tricky. Some of them we need to think really well before answer the question, but try to do your best. It's not a test at this moment. You will have all that information in your email next week, and you can study by yourself, okay, in your own time. But in the meantime, let's go in the question, and feel free to ask us any question. If you don't understand the question, feel free to open your mic, your microphone, and ask the question to us, okay?
Okay. So yeah, I looked through these questions earlier today, and I find them fairly representative of what you might expect on the test. So let's start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the question, but I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all the answers. So you can look at the screen and look at them yourself. So the question is, which of the following best encapsulates the primary reason for considering lifecycle costs and establishing security program requirements? So I'll give you, what, 30 seconds to give it your best shot? Not very long, but we have 30 of these to get through.
And you can answer in the chat.
Okay, I'll go and reveal the answer. The answer is B. To provide a comprehensive understanding of financial implications, including ongoing maintenance, operational expenses, and future upgrade needs, ensuring long-term effectiveness and sustainability. This question is good because there's a couple of similars that could be. D is you would have to read it and be sure you understand. But some of these questions, there's very similar answers. Okay, next question. Good old SEPTED. Read the question. In the context of crime prevention through environmental design, or SEPTED, which one of the following is not an example of this design concept? Okay, that's a fairly quick one. And the answer, of course, is risk analysis. That is not part of SEPTED. Now, you may use SEPTED as part of your risk plan, but it's not part of SEPTED. A security system designer aims to implement measures that provide ample time for security personnel to respond after an intrusion is detected, using reinforced doors and strategically placed obstacles. This approach primarily aligns with which of the 4 Ds? That's a fairly short one, so I'm going to just go ahead. And the answer, of course, is delay. Strategically placed obstacles, reinforced doors, that is indicative of delay tactic. Question 4, the core advantage of adopting a defense in depth layered security strategy in physical security system design is its ability to and I'll go ahead and give you the answer. It's B. Yep, we spoke about that. Ensure that an adversary must overcome multiple independent security controls, thereby increasing delay, improving detection, and eliminating single points of failure. That sums up defense in depth. Next question. During the risk analysis phase of security system design, which component explicitly informs the selection of appropriate countermeasures by identifying the capabilities, likelihood, and methods of potential adversaries? So which one of those? This is a tricky question too.
Yeah.
Because there could be similar responses, right, Nelson?
Yeah.
This is what you're going to expect.
That is a kind of question that you can expect in the test, exactly.
Yeah. And as I said previously, if you have a problem with the question, don't dwell on it. If you know the answer, go ahead, but put it on hold in the system, in the computer system that they give you. You'll be able to go back to it and have another look when you've completed the last question. So the answer on this one is threat assessment. A threat assessment involves understanding who or what poses a danger.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. Oh, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Basically, we have a good answer in the chat. Okay.
Okay. Question 6, when establishing security system requirements, which aspect of system compatibility design constraints is most directly concerned with the ability of the system to adapt and grow with future organizational needs and technological advancements? Yeah, that's the kind of clue there is the word scalability, because you'll find that a lot. It means basically that system can be scaled as needed. By the way, the ASIS PAP 2021, that is their physical asset protection standard. Again, if you're an ASIS member, I sound like I'm really pushing ASIS or ASIS, but you can download the ebook for free from ASIS if you remember. That is their physical asset protection standard. A security professional reviews a document outlining the fundamental rationale, underlying assumptions, and specific performance goals that will guide the entire security system design process. This document is best described by which term? Okay, and the answer on this one is design basis. So design basis is the rationale, assumptions, and performance goals guiding system design. It basically represents a detailed account of the why and the how of the project. The primary role of applicable code standards and guidelines like ASIS PAP 2021 or NFPA 731 in physical security system design is to and the answer is, of course, D. PAP 2021 or NFPA 731 act as mandatory benchmarks and regulatory requirements that shape the system's features and limitations. So NFPA 731, it's a standard for installation requirements of security systems. It outlines this installation, performance testing, and maintenance of premises security systems. The NFPA document 731, I haven't found a free download yet. It's something you probably have to pay for, but you can get the gist of it. If you look at the ASIS website, you might find some articles on it that might be helpful. The challenge of adopting a new security system to an existing building, often involving structural limitations or preserved elements, falls under which category of design constraints? Remember, we spoke about this. And of course, the answer to that is material and construction constraints. I remember I did some work down in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian site, and they had some very specific requirements for products that could be mounted, and they wanted them repainted to match everything as well. So,
Yeah.
and also, they needed an upgrade to their cabling as well, the low voltage cabling. The network infrastructure was kind of poor. So all that had to be taken into consideration.
It frequently happen in old building or historical building that you have a lot of problem to install
Yes,
a new security system because you cannot change anything. It will be a material and construction constraint.
exactly. Okay, question 10. In a risk analysis, the impact assessment component plays a critical role by is another difficult one. In these questions, there usually is one you can immediately discard, but there are some where all four, you could balance them all. So the answer to this one is quantifying the potential consequences of a security breach, which helps justify the level of investment in security measures. That is the correct answer. And this is from the from this ANSI, ASIS. This is a Risk Management Society. Yeah, RIMS. I think it stands for Risk Management Society or something like that. But it's a risk assessment organization. But you can also have a look for this, and I believe this is also available on the ASIS website. It's a risk assessment standard.
If you are a member, that is a free document.
Yes. Implementing clearly defined pathways using fences and landscaping to mark property lines and designing entrances to create a distinct sense of arrival are all examples primarily supporting which SEPTED principle? I know we spoke about this. So the correct answer here is natural access control. So from the POA Chapter 10, natural access control is one of the three underlying elements of SEPTED. This principle involves employing real and symbolic barriers, including doors, fences, and shrubbery, to define and limit access to a building or other space. Question 12, the 4Ds, deter, detect, delay, deny, are fundamental concepts that collectively serve what overreaching purpose in physical protection system design? You shouldn't have a problem with this one. And of course, the answer is A. And the clue, I guess, is in the answer is sequential layered approach that systematically addresses and counters an adversary's progression towards a target. Next question. Question 13. A key characteristic of defense in depth is the aim to eliminate any single point of failure. How is this achieved through its application? I think this one is fairly attainable too. And as you may have guessed, the answer is C. By creating redundancy where a breach in one layer does not compromise the entire system, as multiple independent layers must be overcome. That is the key point of defense in depth. It's actually a good quote from the POA Chapter 5. Using a defense in depth approach means an adversary must avoid or defeat a number of protective devices or features in sequence. That's what makes it so strong. 14, when establishing security program performance requirements, ensuring that an access control system can seamlessly exchange information and operate in conjunction with an intrusion detection system is a prime example of addressing a design constraint. So what is that? Or which design constraint is it? So that one's fairly easy. That is, of course, you're dealing with access control, seamlessly exchanging information, and operating in conjunction with an intrusion detection system. Of course, it's system compatibility. 15, what is the crucial distinguishing characteristic between a field test and acceptance testing? And we also addressed this in one of the earlier slides. Okay, and the answer, of course, is A. So field test would give you preliminary functionality at the installation site before the solution was fully installed. And in contrast, acceptance testing is a formal and comprehensive verification process once everything has been installed. I know some manufacturers may want to do a field test occurring in a controlled environment, but that's not the right answer. Which category of requirements defines how security systems will function daily, considering personnel, procedures, and routine usage? We spoke about the various requirements before. It's very hard to remember the various subcategories in functional performance and operational. It really is. I had a problem with this too. It's just something you have to remember and learn. But the answer in this one is operational. Think of operational, what they're describing there, how security systems will function daily. Think of it as kind of an operation manual for the system, thus operational requirements. 17, which element, if not clearly defined, can make even the most sophisticated security system ineffective? And the answer on this one is C. If you don't have a well-defined procedure for operation, then you're not going to be able to have a very successful and well working security system. A poorly defined operation procedure can make the most sophisticated security system ineffective. 18, the ability of a security system to maintain critical operations despite partial failures, such as through backup power or failover servers, is a key aspect of which requirement type? This is a tough one. And one thing I do like about practice questions is it does highlight what you may not be so knowledgeable in. And it does help you point yourself to, read up on things that you don't get right all the time. But anything with performance requirements, operational or functional, they can be tough questions. So this will be categorized under functional requirements. And from the POA Chapter 5 below, the opportunity for and the consequences of component failure must be assessed and factored into an overall physical security plan.
Yeah, keep in mind some people was confused and it's a tricky question, but yeah. For example, in the question, they mentioned backup power. When we review the slides, one of the backup power is related to functional requirement. It's a function that the system need to make. It's required a function, but it's not operational. It's not a performance. It's not a metrics.
Mm-hmm. Yep, those are tricky. Okay, sorry, I wrongly numbered that. That should be 19, but think it catches up at some point. Which one of the following are not examples of design constraints? Remember design constraints from slide 1, I think it was. 2. This one is fairly easy because we were talking about requirements, but functional requirements, that's not part of design constraints. Again, be very careful of these questions where there's a not, and they won't be capitalized like we did for you there. They may just say, which of the following is not an example of design constraints? And if you just read the question very quickly, you can miss that. Then it can really mess up your day and confuse the situation. Specifying that an access control system must support 5,000 badge holders, or that turnstiles must handle a throughput of 500 users per hour during shift change, are examples of criteria. Again, here's another question on operational, functional, and performance. So which one is that? And the answer is it's performance. Yes, because that is what you'd expect the system and how you must want it to perform using those metrics. Question 20, interfacing a physical security system with HR systems falls under which category of requirements? Here's another requirements question. So what do you think the answer is? Okay, that would be categorized under functional. It's a function of the system. Yeah, this is good down here. So functional would be determined by asking, what is the purpose of the system? What specifically is each camera supposed to view? Or what are the requirements for proactive risk reduction? What would be, these are the whats, if you want. 21, which of the following documents is least likely, read the question carefully, to be where performance specifications for a security system are defined? So A, B, and D are likely to be where performance specifications would be defined. Where they wouldn't be would be post orders and training compliance documents. '22, beyond merely validating that operational, functional, and performance requirements are being met, what other crucial role do security metrics play? Okay, so that is answer D, identifying underperformance, justifying budgets, and aligning security posture with organizational objectives. And from the ASIS, I think this is the business continuity management document. Metrics provide a means to identify problems and discover broken internal processes. They can reveal areas requiring correction or improvement within the security program. When evaluating a proposed security metric, ensuring it is time-bound according to the SMART framework primarily means so the answer there is C. Yes, we spoke about that. The metric is collected and valued at a set intervals, such as daily or weekly or monthly or hourly, whatever. And from the POA Chapter 4, a metric should be consistently collected using the same time periods, day, week, month, or it will yield inaccurate results, which is absolutely true. Which of the following describes a requirement for a security system's inherent capability rather than a metric used to evaluate its ongoing performance? So the answer there is C. So that is a requirement for a security system's inherent capability, which is access control system's ability to authenticate credentials. That is its inherent capability. Question 25, a comprehensive operational requirement for staffing would include all of the following except. I think this one is fairly easy. And the answer here, of course, is mean time between failure for mobile patrol apps. I don't think there is such a thing. Typically, MTBF is hardware for hardware type products. And POA Chapter 14, MTBF is a performance parameter for security systems and components. Question 26, what is a key characteristic of a functional requirement for video surveillance, distinguishing it from a performance or operational aspect? Another one of these questions. These are tough. I would be torn between two answers here.
Yeah. It's tough, but
Okay, so let's go to the answer. C, its ability to record continuously and on motion and integrate with alarms for event-based recording. And the certification review from the PSP 2018, a functional requirement for a video surveillance system specifies what the system must do, outlining its core capabilities and features. So that is more of the answer, I think, than A, which is the other way I was swinging. We're almost done. 27. What time? Oh, I think we can just squeeze this in. If a security
yeah,
metric is described as repeatable within the SMART framework, what does this imply about its characteristic? I'll give you even last time since we can get this done. And I do remember we spoke about this. The answer is C, it can be consistently replicated and measured across different periods or conditions. 28, the concept of redundant or backup options is a component of which broader requirement type? Another one of these questions. And the answer is functional. This is a functional requirement. And from the POA Chapter 11, Section 1151, you can see the redundancy and backup. Providing redundant or backup capability for critical components is highlighted as a characteristic of effective alarm communication and display. A functional, in essence, a functional requirement defines what a system must do. Those are tough questions. A security design team is planning a surveillance system for an office building that must comply with data retention and public notification rules. This requirement falls under which type of design constraint? This one's fairly easy. And of course, since the word comply is in there with data retention and public notification rules, the answer is regulatory requirements. And I think this is the last question. Which of the following physical security measures is primarily intended to deter a potential adversary from even attempting an intrusion? So you can read the possible answers there. Remember, that's the D, the deter of the 4Ds. That's the first D. That one should be fairly easy, yes. And the answer is D. Visible security cameras, warning signs, and robust fencing around a property perimeter. So the ASIS PAT 2021, it mentions psychological deterrence as one of the primary functions, as well as the function of surveillance, of course, too. So that's it. Well, it did take longer than I thought. I knew this was going to be a long one because there's a lot to discuss in this domain and task. So if there's any questions, feel free.
Yeah, we are going time, 92 minutes. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody for being here in this Unlocking PSP. If you have any question, feel free to send that question in the chat or in the email. I will take some time to answer those questions. See you next week.